The universe does not whisper before it strikes. It screams. And that morning, the scream came from Marielle Adisa in the form of a vision, so sharp it sliced through her sleep. A vision of her body lying on a cold floor, her breath snagged in her chest, her hand curled like a dead branch. She woke with her heart sundering, knowing without knowing that danger was already inside her home, moving toward her on silent feet. But the world outside pretended nothing was wrong. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen in soft golden ribbons, drifting peacefully across the marble countertops as if mocking the storm rising inside her. And Marielle moved through the room with the precision of someone who had carried an entire family on her back for decades, slicing cheese, checking her tablet, organizing breakfast for people who did not see the weight she held for them. Her daughter, Nelise, sat at the counter, glowing screen in her hand, her tone casual, her request predictable. Money, again, always money, always urgency, always taking without a pause to breathe or think. Marielle transferred the funds automatically, the act so familiar it felt carved into her bones. And as she did, a small crack rippled through her spirit, but she ignored it like she always did, swallowing the ache before it reached the surface. Her husband Tavon shuffled into the room wearing his worn robe, shoulders slumped, eyes heavy from years of settling for less than he once dreamed. He greeted her with the same tired voice that had replaced the man she used to know, and she handed him his morning cup, already knowing he would forget a task she reminded him of, already knowing she would handle everything he missed because that was how their story always went. When their son Joran burst into the kitchen with wild energy, thanking her for transferring money before she even remembered the request, she felt her heart tighten. He spoke about new jobs, new beginnings, new promises, all painted in colors too bright and too temporary, and she nodded because she no longer had the strength to fight his cycles of hope, crash, hope, crash, hope, crash. Marielle left home dressed in her sharp suit, determined to survive another day at the firm, where she was the force behind countless financial empires while her own life quietly crumbled inside the walls she paid for. She navigated meeting after meeting, call after call, crisis after crisis, guiding teams, clients, strategies, and not once did her family call to ask if she had eaten or rested or breathed. By the time she rode the crowded train home, exhausted, spine aching, eyes burning, she found herself staring at a glowing ad overhead, a place called Elevera, a mosaic of turquoise water and white sand, a paradise so peaceful it felt like a lie. And yet it stirred something inside her, a desire to give her family something beautiful, something pure, something that might glue the shattered pieces back together, if only for a moment. So she built a plan. She sliced every unnecessary expense. She took weekend projects. She canceled her long-awaited bathroom renovation. She worked until dawn and through dusk, carrying the dream of a 2-week escape to the islands for the four of them, together at last, happy for once, breathing for once, united for once. Months passed in a blur of work and sacrifice until the day she revealed the news. A trip to Elevera with overwater villas, private pools, views so breathtaking they could wash sorrow from memory for a heartbeat. Her family actually looked like a family again. Nelise squealed, Joran jumped, Tavon forced a smile that wobbled at the edges, and Marielle felt warmth blooming in a place inside her that had long been cold. The days leading to the departure were filled with shopping, excitement, planning, choosing outfits, excursions, flights. The house buzzing like a hive, finally alive again. And Marielle let herself believe. Maybe this would save them. Maybe this would be the turning of a new chapter. Maybe love could return if given the right horizon to rise upon. But fate had already written a different sentence. 3 days before the flight, Marielle woke with a heaviness in her skull, a slow poison creeping through her veins. She stepped into the kitchen, determined to make breakfast, determined to push through one more day, determined to see her family smile in aloe vera. And then her knife slipped from her hand, her fingers turned numb, her vision swirled like water pulled down a drain, and the world tilted beneath her feet. She tried to call Tavon, but her voice splintered into broken fragments. She tried to step, but her right side refused. She felt her body collapsing while her mind screamed in terror. She hit the floor, her cheek slamming against cold tiles, the world exploding into a haze of sounds that she could not grasp. Tavon shouting, Nalise gasping, Joran stumbling into the room asking questions she could not answer. The ambulance lights carved red streaks through her fading vision. The hospital swallowed her into a world of tests, scans, needles, and strained voices trying to fight time. And for the first time in her life, Marielle felt powerless, truly powerless, lying still in a sterile room while her life rearranged itself without her permission. When her family gathered around her, it was not warmth she felt, but something colder, something that moved beneath their words like a hidden current as they spoke in low tones while her mind struggled to keep up. She heard them mention the trip, the dates, the non-refundable tickets, the money she had spent, the arrangements she had made, the luxury villa waiting for them. They spoke softly, but the truth screamed through every syllable. They were not canceling. They were thinking about going without her. And in that moment, a new crack opened inside her, larger, deeper, darker than all the others combined. Marielle lay there, trapped in her body, listening to the people she loved most, debating whether her suffering was an inconvenience to their plans. And in that suffocating silence, a new force unfurled inside her, slow and burning like a quiet fire, lighting a path she did not yet understand. Something inside her shifted that night. Something quiet. Something strong. Something that whispered not of survival, but of awakening. Because what came next was not weakness. It was revelation, and the consequences would echo louder than any storm.
The truth does not walk toward you slowly, it lunges. And that night, as Marielle Adisa lay in her hospital bed, the truth sprinted straight into her life with claws sharp enough to tear open every illusion she had ever clung to. The lights above her flickered like tired stars, as the monitors beside her hummed in steady rhythm. And though her body felt heavy, her mind raced faster than it ever had, her heartbeat thundering in her ears as fragments of her family's whispered conversation replayed over and over. They were truly planning to leave. They were truly planning to board the plane to Elevara without her, as if she were luggage that could be left behind without a second thought. Morning crawled in through thin blinds, the light cold, the air colder, and when the door opened, Tavon entered wearing the face of a man rehearsing lines for a performance he was certain he could nail. His eyes tried to look sorrowful, but Marielle saw the flicker beneath them, the calculation, the nervous hesitation, the guilt he was trying desperately to bury. Nalise stood behind him, arms folded, gaze drifting not toward her mother, but toward the hospital clock, as if she too were keeping track of something more important than the woman who had raised her. And Joran hovered near the window, pacing, breathing heavy, biting his lip like a trapped animal, but not from grief, from fear of what might happen to their travel plans. Marielle attempted to speak, but the words tangled in her throat, her tongue sluggish, her lips slow, and Tavon stepped forward, placing his hand gently on her shoulder, the gesture soft, but his tone too rehearsed, too controlled. He told her what she already dreaded to hear, that the trip was non-refundable, that the resort booking could not be changed, that the flights would not be credited, and that it would be a shame, a waste to let all that money slip away while she rested here, receiving the care she needed. Receiving the care she needed. Those words echoed like an insult disguised as kindness. Mariel wanted to scream. She wanted to rise. She wanted to tear the room apart with the fury building inside her, but her body betrayed her, and all she could do was stare. And in that quiet stare, they mistook her paralysis for agreement. Tavon spoke again, explaining that he had arranged for Miss Remy, the elderly neighbor, to check on her daily, that the nurses would care for her around the clock, that she would not be abandoned, and as he continued to justify what they were about to do, she realized it was not just convenience, this was who they truly were beneath the thin veil of family. Nalise stepped forward then, her voice trembling, not from sorrow but from discomfort. "Mom, we have been planning this for months and you wanted us to go and have fun, right? You would not want the money to be wasted. You said so whenever we talked about expenses." Joran nodded quickly, almost too quickly, reinforcing his sister's claim, repeating the same reasoning, and Mariel felt her soul fracture into 1,000 silent shards. They were going without her. They had already decided, and she was powerless to stop them. A nurse entered to check her vitals, creating a brief shift in the air, and as the family stepped back, Mariel watched their expressions soften with relief because the interruption meant they could avoid the weight of their own betrayal. And when the nurse left, Tavon placed a folder on the small bedside table, gently but with urgency, the way someone might set down a bomb before running. "This is just for temporary access," he said, voice thin and shaky, "so we can handle expenses during the trip and manage the house while you rest. They need your signature before we leave." He opened the folder and pulled out a document Mariel did not fully comprehend through her haze. A document she tried to read, but the words slid across her vision, blurring, merging, twisting, and her weakened body could not fight her clouded mind. She wanted to refuse, but she could not form the word. She wanted to push his hand away, but her arm did not move. She wanted to tell them they were draining her, not just of money, but of strength, but her throat was choked with the weight of betrayal. So she signed the paper, her name trembling across the page like a broken branch in the wind, and as the pen left her grasp, she felt something deep and sacred unravel. Her family left soon after, bustling with excitement, already discussing swimsuits, luggage weight, and airport arrival times, never once turning back to look at her lying still in the dim room, like an afterthought, like a task completed, like a voice they no longer had to hear. Silence fell heavy after they were gone, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes breathing feel like lifting stone. And the only sound was the faint humming of machines, keeping her tethered to the world. Miss Remy arrived later in the evening with her warm smile, carrying a jar of soup and a soft blanket, unaware of the venom behind the words Tavon had told her. She believed they were leaving for an urgent trip. She believed Mariel wanted them to go. She believed the lie they crafted to clean their conscience. Mariel listened to her neighbor talk about the neighborhood, about flowers blooming, about small joys, but inside she felt nothing. She had been hollowed out, scraped clean, left empty like an abandoned shell washed ashore. Hours later, in the stillness of night, she finally broke, tears slipping down her temples, her breath sharp, her chest shaking, as she realized the undeniable truth. Her family had not just left her. They had chosen themselves over her, chosen comfort over compassion, chosen pleasure over loyalty. And she lay there, unable to move, unable to speak, but not unable to think. And in that deepest quiet, a new thought formed, sharp, bright, dangerous, a thought that would shift the course of everything that came after. If they could leave her behind so easily, then she could leave the version of herself that allowed it behind as well. Her transformation had begun. Even if they did not know it, even if she did not fully see it yet, because betrayal is not the end of a story, it is the ignition of a new one. And what Mariel was about to discover would flip every truth she believed upside down.
Night pressed against the hospital windows like a living shadow, and in that dark haze, Mariel Adisa felt a fire awakening inside her, a fire she had never allowed herself to feed before, a fire carved from betrayal and sharpened by the realization that the people she lived for would not have hesitated to forget her if it meant preserving their comfort. And as the hours crawled, she understood that the version of herself who endured everything silently was dying, and something new was rising in her place. Her breath hitched with effort, her right side heavy as stone, yet her mind crackled with clarity, a clarity that felt almost frightening. She replayed the moment she signed the document, her hand shaking, her vision blurred, her heart drowning in fear. She saw again the faces of Tavan, Nalise, and Joran, their eagerness barely concealed, their guilt thin as tissue. And she felt a sharp twist deep inside, a truth she could not swallow anymore. She had been used, not loved, supported, or cherished, but used, shaped into an endless reservoir and drained until empty. The door opened gently, and Nurse Arlena stepped in, pushing a small cart, her presence soft, her eyes carrying a worn kindness that made Mariel feel seen in a way her own family never had. Arlena checked the IV carefully, then turned to her with a look that pierced straight through her shattered heart. And when Mariel tried to speak, her words trembled out in fragments about the trip, about the signature, about the folder, about the tightness in her chest as her family walked out glowing with excitement for a paradise she would never see. Arlena's expression darkened, not with anger, but with something stronger, a fierce protectiveness. She picked up the folder from the bedside table, flipping through the papers slowly, her brows knitting, her gaze sharp as a hawk surveying prey. And after a long, heavy moment, she exhaled a slow breath. "This is not a temporary financial access form," she said in a steady, soft voice. "This is a full transfer of authority over all your assets and properties and accounts. If this is signed, they hold legal control over everything you own." The world tilted, and Mariel felt her pulse crash against itself, the room spinning again, but not from weakness, from the shock of knowing the depth of the betrayal. And Arlena squeezed her unsteady hand gently, her voice firm with resolve. "We need to fix this now. Who do you trust? Who can step in and undo this? Who will stand on your side without using your condition against you?" Mariel searched her foggy memories for anyone who had not taken advantage of her generosity. And the name arrived slowly, like a distant ship emerging through the mist, a name she had almost forgotten. A man she once worked with, someone loyal, steady, sharp-minded. She whispered it brokenly. And Arlena nodded immediately, pulling out her phone, dialing under Mariel's guidance, contacting him with urgency woven through every word she spoke. An hour later, the door swung open, revealing a tall figure who stepped in like a storm contained only by self-control. Drayton Hale, corporate attorney, calm, watchful, focused. He carried a small leather case and an energy that felt like protection. Mariel felt a rush of relief as he approached, his presence steadying her heart. And Drayton greeted her with warmth, but without pity, which made her throat tighten. She hated pity. Pity was the root of exploitation she had lived with for years. He took the document into his hands, scanning it with the precision of a blade. And as he read, his jaw hardened, his voice low and controlled as he said that this was indeed a general authority grant, giving complete control over all finances, real estate, investments, and assets. That with this paper, Tavan could drain accounts, sell property, take out loans, and leave Mariel with nothing but hospital bills and memories. And Drayton looked up at her with eyes that burned with righteous fury as he said, "This can be undone, but we must act immediately." Arlena helped reposition Mariel as Drayton pulled out new forms, crisp and clean, revocation files, protective orders, bank alerts, legal notices. He guided her hand slowly, carefully, so her trembling fingers could slide across each line, signing back her own life piece by piece, reclaiming what had been stolen before the thieves even reached the airport. And for the first time since her collapse, she felt something rise in her. Not hope, not yet, but power, the faint beginnings of it, fragile but real. When the final page was signed, Drayton leaned closer, his voice lowering into a solemn pledge. Your assets are safe now, and your accounts will be frozen pending review. Tavon cannot touch a single dollar. And Mariel closed her eyes, relief washing through her like warm rain. She whispered gratitude, a broken sound pulled from deep within. And Arlena laid a reassuring hand on her arm, telling her, "You are not alone, not anymore." Morning light seeped through the window when Arlena returned, carrying breakfast and a soft determination that warmed the cold corners of the room. She told Mariel that the family had already left for the airport, happy, excited, their laughter echoing down the hallway of the building, according to Miss Remy, who had seen them load their bags into the taxi. And as Arlena spoke, Mariel did not feel pain. She felt distance, a distance like a doorway finally closing behind her. Hours passed slowly, and Mariel practiced slow movements with her left hand, swallowing water, forming small words, refusing to let her spirit collapse alongside her body. She remembered Drayton's last words, that she would need stronger boundaries, sharper vision, clearer alliances. And as she drifted between waking and rest, she vowed silently that she would never again let herself be taken for granted. She would rise. She would rebuild. She would reclaim the pieces of herself she had abandoned for others. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed weakly against the tray beside her. She lifted it with her good hand and saw Tavon's name flashing again and again, call after call, relentless like a storm pounding against a closed door. And when she finally answered, his voice crashed through the receiver, frantic, breathless, angry. He said the card was not working, the payments denied, the resort check-in denied, baggage fees stalled, everything frozen, everything blocked. Mariel listened without speaking, her silence more powerful than any words she could muster. And Tavon demanded answers, his voice rising with panic. But she did not respond until he finally paused, and in that breathless gap, she spoke, her voice controlled, fragile but sharp like glass. You left without me. Now you can pay without me. Then she ended the call, her hand trembling not from weakness, but from strength newly born within her. And as she placed the phone face down, she felt an eerie calm spreading through her chest, the calm of a woman no longer willing to bow. Because she was done being their foundation, she was becoming her own. And what she was about to do next would reshape everything they believed they could get away with.
Dawn crawled across the hospital ceiling in quiet, pale streaks. Yet inside Mariel Adisa, a storm was beginning to roar. A storm that no weakness, no paralysis, no betrayal could silence anymore. She lay in her bed with her right side numb, her speech slow, her breath tight, but her mind blazing like a wildfire, finally free to burn everything that once kept her small. Outside in the hallway, she could hear Tavon's voice booming in frantic anger, arguing with the staff, demanding to see her, demanding explanations, demanding access, demanding control. Because for the first time in decades, he could not touch her money, could not touch her house, could not touch her decisions, and the lock he once held on her life had snapped clean in his hands, leaving him exposed, powerless, furious.
Nurse Arlena calmly blocked him, reminding him again that visiting hours had not begun, that the patient was stable, that there was no emergency, that he needed to step aside. And his frustration spilled like acid into the air as he insisted that Marielle was confused, unstable, mentally shaken, and unable to make choices. And his voice rattled the hallway, but not her, not anymore. Inside, Marielle listened, not with fear, but with an awakening sense of justice. She did not want his rage to penetrate her peace. She did not want his voice to pull her back into old patterns. She only wanted to inhale strength and exhale the remnants of who she once was, the version of herself that allowed 3 people she loved to use her until she broke. When Arlena finally entered Marielle's room, she shook her head with a subtle shake and said softly, "He is trying to push past the rules, but I will not let him near you until you are ready." And Marielle's eyes filled with silent gratitude, not tears, not weakness, but recognition that true care often comes from strangers, not from those who claim to love you. Later in the morning, Drayton Hale returned, stepping into the room with the presence of someone who carried certainty the way others carried breath. He checked the documents, the signatures, the bank confirmations, each detail aligned like soldiers guarding her newfound freedom. And he told her that everything had been secured, that her accounts had been transferred, that her assets were legally shielded, and that any attempt her family made to access her property would be denied instantly. Marielle exhaled in relief, though her chest trembled slightly from the effort. And Drayton sat beside her, speaking gently but firmly, telling her that she needed long-term protection, that she needed a stability plan, a financial barrier, and legal armor. And Marielle nodded slowly, each word a spark, lighting a new path inside her, a path she had never dared to walk because she had always walked for others, not for herself. Arlena entered then, with a warm towel, helping Marielle move her weak arm, supporting her as she drank water, guiding her step by step through tiny movements that felt enormous. Each gesture a quiet act of rebuilding, small but powerful like thunder whispers before a storm breaks open. And for the first time, Marielle felt pride in these little victories because they were hers, not a sacrifice for someone else, but a gift to herself. Hours passed, and as the sun climbed higher, she received another call, this time not from Tavan, but from Nalise, the screen glowing with her daughter's name. And Marielle hesitated before answering, lifting the phone with her steady left hand. And when she pressed the button, Nalise's voice poured out, drenched in panic, not sorrow, but inconvenience. She accused her mother of ruining their trip, of embarrassing them at the airport, of making everything harder, of being selfish for the first time in her life. Selfish. The girl who drained Marielle for years without remorse was calling her selfish. And Marielle listened, her silence a wall too tall for manipulation to climb. And when Nalise paused, Marielle finally spoke with a voice soft but unbreakable. "You chose your comfort over my life. You left me without hesitation. Now you must learn to stand without me." And she ended the call, letting the silence settle across her new identity. By afternoon, Marielle was transferred from the emergency wing to a recovery suite, a room brighter, calmer,
larger, with a window facing a green courtyard where sunlight touched every leaf, and the world outside looked like a place she could re-enter one day, not as a woman exhausted from giving, but as a woman rising from ashes she did not ask for. Arlena helped her settle, adjusting pillows, supporting her back, helping her sit upright, and she told Marielle that progress would be slow but possible, that recovery was not a punishment but a path. And Marielle believed her, believed every word, because she could feel that path under her feet, even if she could barely walk yet. Drayton Hale returned in the evening, carrying more documents, a new file with a single purpose, the file for dissolution of marriage. Marielle stared at it, a quiet stillness wrapping around her like a cloak, not cold, not warm, but steady and unshaken. He asked gently if she was certain, because once she signed it, the line between her past and her future would split forever. Marielle lifted her hand, slow, steady, deliberate, her fingers trembling, but her intention firm. She knew that healing required cutting away infection. She knew that peace required ending chaos. She knew that loving herself first required no apology. So she signed, leaving a mark that felt like reclaiming her heartbeat. As the sky outside darkened, the phone buzzed again. Tavan calling again and again, messages appearing like desperate sparks across the screen, each one filled with guilt, anger, confusion, pleading. And she ignored every single one, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. The clarity of a woman who finally understood her worth. Night blanketed the recovery wing in quiet, soft shadows, and Marielle lay awake, not from pain or fear, but from something new unfurling inside her, like an ancient creature stretching after centuries of sleep. She was learning to breathe again, not for others, but for herself. She was learning to see again, not through obligation, but through purpose. She was learning to exist without bending and shrinking to fit the spaces others demanded. She drifted to sleep eventually, the soft beeping of monitors tapping a gentle rhythm, and just before her consciousness slipped away, she felt a strange sensation in her good hand, a warmth traveling up her arm, a pulse of something powerful, something she recognized as the first sign that she was coming back to life. But what awaited her tomorrow would not be peace or calm. It would be the next battle, the next revelation, the next storm. Because her family was not done fighting, and neither was she. And the moment they realized they no longer controlled her was the moment everything would explode. The morning rose like a quiet prophecy, spilling pale light across the rehabilitation center, and Mariel Adisa felt the world shifting beneath her spirit. She woke with a strange calm thrumming through her veins, a calm that did not belong to the woman who once sacrificed every hour, every breath, every drop of strength for a family that turned away the moment ease called them. She woke as someone different, someone reborn through fire instead of affection, and she could sense the day carrying a weight heavier than all that came before it. Nurse Arlena entered with a gentle knock, guiding Mariel through her morning movements, lifting her arm, stretching her fingers, helping her sit upright. And Mariel felt the effort in every muscle, but it was no longer the pain of weakness. It was the ache of someone sharpening themselves, piece by piece, reclaiming their body, their mind, their purpose, every small victory a spark, every spark a promise of new life. And Arlena smiled at her, saying softly, "You are getting stronger faster than most." And Mariel knew it was true because strength had finally chosen her. Later that afternoon, Drayton Hale returned, bringing updates wrapped in the sharp clarity of his presence. He informed her that all financial protections were complete, all transfers finalized, all legal shields active, her accounts locked to everyone except her, and the divorce petition filed with precision, so clean, her past could not claw its way back into her future. He also told her something else, something that made the air in the room tremble slightly. Tavan and the children had returned from Elevara, and they were furious, disoriented, and desperate. Mariel felt nothing in response, not anger, not grief, not guilt, only an unshakable stillness, the kind that settles in a woman who has faced the edge of destruction and stepped back stronger. Her jaw tightened, her gaze sharpened, and Drayton noticed the quiet fire in her eyes, and he nodded, as if witnessing a truth he had known would come to surface from the first moment he saw her in the hospital bed. As evening approached, the center hallway echoed with hurried footsteps, the sound sharp as an approaching storm, and Arlena stepped inside urgently, whispering, "They are here, all three of them. They are demanding to see you, and they are not calm." Mariel inhaled slowly, letting the breath fill her with a new kind of power. The power not of confrontation, but of clarity, deep, unwavering clarity. She told Arlena to bring them in, one at a time, not because she feared them, but because she did not want their chaos to crash into her peace all at once. First came Joran, his face pale, exhaustion clinging to him like a second skin. He stepped inside, hesitating, uncertainty carved deep into his posture. He looked at his mother, not with entitlement, but with the bewilderment of someone finally seeing the consequences of their own choices. He said he was struggling, that his firm had dismissed him, that he had run out of money, and that he had come to ask for help again. And Mariel looked at him with a love stripped of indulgence, a love built now on truth, not enabling. She told him gently but firmly that she would help him find work, she would help him stand. But she would no longer carry him like a child. He must rise on his own 2 feet, or he would never rise at all. And Joran crumbled, collapsing onto the nearby chair, his head in his hands, because deep down he knew she was right. He had always known it, and now he could not hide from it. Next came Nelise, her expression sharp, her eyes red from tears or rage or both. She accused Mariel of betrayal, of cruelty, of destroying their trip, destroying their comfort, destroying the life they built on her backbone. And Mariel listened without flinching, her heart no longer bending to the old performance she had once fallen for. Nelise demanded money, demanded keys, demanded the version of her mother who always provided, always rescued, always sacrificed. But that mother was gone. That mother had died on the kitchen floor the day her body collapsed and her family kept packing their bags for paradise. Mariel told her daughter that love was not servitude, and she would no longer drown so that others could float. She told her that if she wanted a life of image, luxury, and show, she must build it herself. And Nelise froze, the truth finally breaking through the fog of her entitlement. She left, hiding her trembling behind the clink of her handbag, but Mariel saw it, the first crack in her daughter's armor, and she hoped one day it would grow into growth instead of bitterness. Last came Tavan, his face drained of the arrogance he once wore like a badge. He stepped inside quiet, unusually quiet. He looked around the room, then at her, and something deep in his gaze shifted, something regretful, something wounded, something late, too late. He confessed that he never realized how much she held, how much she balanced, how much she sacrificed. He said he thought she would always be there, always available, always forgiving, always soft. And he admitted he was wrong. He asked if they could rebuild, if they could repair, if they could rewrite the story they destroyed with greed, And Mario felt the weight of his words, heavy, but not convincing. She looked at him with a gaze clean of anger, clean of longing, clean of expectation. She told him she wished him healing, she wished him clarity, she wished him growth, but she would not return to being the woman she once was, not for him, not for anyone. Because the woman he abandoned in the hospital was gone, and the woman standing before him now was not someone he knew how to love. Tavon nodded, heartbroken but understanding, something deep and true in his chest finally unraveling, and he walked out quietly, closing the door with a softness that felt like acceptance instead of defeat. When the room fell silent again, Mariel felt a strange lightness, a weight lifting that she had carried for decades without ever acknowledging its cost. She sat taller, her breath steady, her spirit awake. She felt like someone stepping into sunlight after years in shadow, someone discovering their own name for the first time, someone reborn by the very pain meant to break her. Days passed, and her strength grew like dawn gathering brightness, until she moved to a rehabilitation apartment with wide windows and fresh air. Drayton visited often, guiding her legal transitions. Arlena stayed by her side, cheering every step, and slowly the idea bloomed in her heart, a center for people like her, survivors, fighters, souls who had been abandoned, broken, or overlooked. Months later, she stood proudly at the opening of a new support center filled with light and hope, a sanctuary she had built from the fragments of her old life and the fire of her new one. She spoke to a room full of survivors, telling them that losing what she thought she needed was how she discovered who she truly was. And her voice did not tremble, not once. Because Mariel Adisa was finally whole, finally strong, finally hers. If you loved the story, watch again, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel for more powerful life stories.